Oh, hi.
Great. So welcome, Darren Springer from Burlington Electric.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having us. Darren Springer, General Manager with Burlington Electric Department. We are the largest municipal electric utility in the state. We serve the entire city of Burlington and the Burlington International Airport. We are excited to be here to talk about some of the policy that you're discussing. We were part of the legislative working group that met during the off session. We are supportive of the framework that was outlined earlier by Candace Morgan, that's reflected in the comments that we were a party to submitting on pages 28 through 32 of the final report of the legislative working group. And we think that that framework is really important, balanced, comprehensive, and addresses a number of different issues. For us, there are really four critical things that we think about when we talk about renewable energy standard reform. We've been 100% renewable since 2014, first city in the nation to achieve that distinction. And the renewable energy standard, which I had the privilege to work on previously during my service in state government, the original version that was passed in 2015, that recognized Burlington Electric, Swanton, and Washington Electric as being 100% renewable. And so certain of the requirements within the renewable standard don't apply to those utilities, particularly, for example, the Tier 2 requirement. However, we have to maintain our 100% renewable supply. There are other requirements that do apply. One of the things in the framework that's important is just continuing that treatment for 100% renewable utilities. And that's something that we care quite a bit about, having built up a 100% renewable portfolio. With that said, we recognize, and our strategy is very explicitly, that we want to electrify as much as we can in Burlington. We have incentives for heat pumps, EVs, and really everything that you can electrify, induction cooking, e-bikes, transit buses. We have the first electric bucket truck in the state that's serving our line crew, was put in service with state support as well this past year in 2023. So we're really focused on electrification. We understand that as we electrify, we're going to need additional renewable energy to stay 100% renewable. So there's a concept that's embedded in the framework, essentially saying that for utilities like us, we wouldn't necessarily have some of these different requirements. We talked about Tier 1A or new regional renewables. That wouldn't pertain to us, but what would pertain is fairly significant requirements that as our load grows, we're going to meet that with those same types of new renewables at increasing percentages. So for us, there's a great alignment there from an affordability standpoint, with the fact that if we have additional sales and we have additional revenue, we can afford to invest in more renewables. And that's a much better strategy than saying, let's replace some of our existing renewables with new renewables. So we're really looking at how do we grow our usage, and then how do we make sure that a good chunk of that usage is coming from new renewables that contribute in the way that Ben Walsh described to helping to decarbonize in the broader region. So that's an important component for us as well. Keeping existing renewables available as part of the renewable energy standard, also very important. We have every type of generation resource in our mix. We have solar, we have wind contracts, we have hydropower, both local that we own and operate, like the Winooski 1 hydro that's right on the bridge between Winooski and Burlington. We also get hydro elsewhere in the state, the region as well. So we have big and small hydro. And of course, we own and operate, 50% owner and operate the McNeil wood chip plant. And so having eligibility for all of those resources as currently exists, continued eligibility is important. We did work, and I want to call your attention in that framework, pages 28 through 32, I believe it starts on page 31. We worked very in a dedicated way with groups like CLF and others who have had concerns about wood energy on language that can update the standards for biomass within the renewable energy standards. That's included in the legislative report in the appendix on page 31. And it sets really stringent standards if you're going to build any kind of a new plant, but make sure that we still have access to our existing plants. And of course, the committee may be aware, we actually just had a vote in Burlington in November to add district energy and move forward with making our plant more efficient and providing waste heat and steam for use at our medical center to help them reduce their natural gas use significantly. Those components are all really important to us. There was one other piece that was mentioned that's also in that framework relative to Tier 3. I think you've heard that for Tier 3, there's really no changes that are requested. We had one small change that I think has a general support. And it's basically to say that if utilities are going above and beyond what's required within Tier 3, they're able to do so, that it's not going to be a ceiling, that it's a floor. And really, that goes back to our strategy of wanting to electrify everything that we can. We're consciously trying where we can to go above the Tier 3 requirements. We've been able to achieve that for several years running. We have a revenue bond that our voters approved to invest in electrification that's helping us to do that. And so we want to make sure that as we continue that strategy, that from a regulatory standpoint, it's treated as a floor and not a ceiling, that nobody comes to us and says, wait, you've done what you need to do, don't do any more, shut off your programs. That's not a scenario we want for our customers. So those are the elements of the framework that really are important to us and that I wanted to talk with you about this morning. There are other pieces that are clearly important from a statewide standpoint that may not impact on us quite as much, but happy to answer any questions that the committee has. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for your testimony. And did you supply a written version of that for us, or can you?
I didn't supply a written version, but we do have, we put out a written release on our website this morning, and I can forward that to the committee. It has those 4 key points.
4 key points.
Yeah, are in there. So I'll forward that to the committee and to Will.
Thank you.
Yes.
Members have questions for Mr. Springer. Burlington, Representative Tory.
Thank you. I just wondered on Tier 3, was there any discussion or has there been thinking about whether storage should be included there?
Yeah, it's an interesting idea. For us, we have very little in the way of energy storage currently. We're looking at different proposals, but we have a relatively compact service territory. We don't experience some of the same types of outages, so we haven't had as much customer interest, but we're seeing it starting to grow. So I think it's an interesting idea. I mean, we're going to pursue it, whether it's part of Tier 3 or not, because I think that the value is largely going to be in peak reduction and in resiliency. So I'm not suggesting that it has to be in order for us to pursue it, but it's an interesting concept. We haven't really looked into it too much.
Great. Representative Smith.
Thank you. You've got a big wood chip plant in Burlington.
Yes.
How much wood do you need to use? I mean, can you calculate the kind of acreage that you might have to burn? You know what I mean?
Yeah, so I can tell you that the plant typically runs around 60% of the year, and we tend to run it during times like now in the winter, when you saw from Peter Sterling that we have times of the year where we're relying heavily as a region on natural gas. 92 to 98% of the time when McNeil's running, the fuel that would otherwise be available is natural gas on the grid. So McNeil plays a really important role, unique in our portfolio, that we can run it that way. We can turn it on when we need it. We use somewhere in the order of 350,000 tons to 400,000 tons of wood on an annual basis. Typically, it can vary a little bit from there. One of the important pieces, though, is we don't actually harvest for McNeil. And in fact, our contract makes really clear that you're not allowed as a forester who's supplying us to go harvest for the purpose of serving McNeil. What we take and what we want is when someone's going out to do a higher value harvest for timber, furniture, sawlogs, whatever it might be, they're going to use that wood that's the higher value wood for those purposes. There's going to be leftover wood, tops and limbs, disease damaged trees. Those are the product that we take, the wood residue that we take. And the analysis that we've seen is that has a much more favorable carbon payback than if you were going and cutting trees for energy, which is not something we.
Is that coming out of Vermont, or is it coming down from Canada?
Yeah, so it's all within a radius of the plant. It's largely Vermont, upstate New York. And the reason it's upstate New York is we have in our permit a condition that we have to get around 75% of our wood by rail. And the rail comes in from the Swanton Wood Yard. So we have upstate New York that delivers in Swanton, and then we have truck deliveries as well at the plant. So it tends to be around 8 or 9 counties in Vermont on a typical year are providing wood chips, as well as places in upstate New York. I should mention too, just for the committee's benefit, we had third-party analysis done on the lands where we have harvesting and the counties where we have harvesting on the carbon sequestration values there. And they found that not far from losing carbon sequestration in those areas, we've actually seen a dramatic increase between 2007 and 2020, which really goes to the idea that if we can keep working lands as working lands, we have 4 foresters on staff, make sure there's a sustainable plan when there is a harvest, we can really manage those lands well and not lose the carbon value, but retain the carbon value, even increase it.
Good. Thank you.
Yeah.
So if you're not doing the cutting, what do your 4 foresters do on staff?
So they are doing several things. They're doing contracts with vendors that are setting standards, saying that if you're going to supply us, here are the standards you need to meet. They do site visits and site planning. They make sure that if we're taking wood from a site, even if we're a relatively small off taker, we put in standards. Like, if you want to sell to us, you're going to have a site management plan that's sustainable. You're going to have to pay attention to things, including, wetlands and deer habitat, other types of standards. And they're making sure that we're getting, according to our guidelines from the PUC, and that we're not getting wood that's coming to us in a way that's not sustainable. So they do a lot of work in the field. They're typically in the field, 3-4 days a week, visiting job sites, ensuring that where somebody is doing a harvest, that's being done correctly, sustainably, and in, comporting with our guidance and with the PUC's requirements for us.
Great, thank you. I'm sure we could learn a lot more about that, and we will, and you've offered that. We need to move on. It's very relevant to the renewable energy standard. We'll go one more with Representative Tory.
I think it's relevant. Just a question for you about air quality from McNeil.
Yes. So great question. There is, and I can send this to the committee as well, there's a memo from Jared Ulmer, who's the Climate Health Program Manager at the Department of Health for Vermont, to the Climate Council on this exact question. It was about McNeil and Rygate, so it's not unique to McNeil. There was a concern, is there an air quality issue? We've invested significantly in pollution control technologies, something called an RSCR, Regenerative Selective Catalytic Reduction System, back in 2008, that reduces NOx emissions to around a quarter of what the state permitted level is for the plant. Our particulate emissions tend to be between a tenth or so of the state standard and about 1/100th of the applicable federal standard. And Jared Ulmer's memo made clear that there are, and I'm quoting in this part, negligible, end quote, health impacts relative to McNeil and Rygate, because they operate with very efficient filtration equipment and pollution control equipment. He raised a concern about residential wood stoves that may operate with much less sophistication in terms of the types of particulate matter. And of all the particulate matter that comes from biomass in the state of Vermont, Rygate and McNeil are less than 1% of it. 90% of it's coming from residential wood stoves. So there's a lot of interesting information there. I'd be happy to send the memo to the committee along with our points on the renewable energy standard. Absolutely.
All right, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
And I have Ken Nolan next, who's joining us via Zoom.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a slideshow that I sent. Here we go. Can you see the slides up?
Ken.
Great, thanks. I'll move quickly through this. For the record, my name is Ken Nolan. I'm the General Manager of Vermont Public Power Supply Authority. We're a state agency that the legislature created in 1979 to help the small municipal utilities run their operation and reach economies of scale. So this first slide just gives you an idea of who the members are. We have 11 municipal utilities we work with at the moment. Burlington recently joined as a strategic member, but they do a lot of the work on their own, and we're looking for ways to partner with them. These 11, we do most of their activities in regulatory realm in power supply. There we go. Just quickly a list of the breadth of services we offer, and I highlighted here renewable energy standard. The existing standard allows VEPSA to meet the requirements for all of its utilities members in the aggregate. So we spend a lot of time running programs around Tier 3 in particular, with rebate programs and so on that we do on behalf of the members and deal with their customers directly. So it puts us pretty directly in the middle of this conversation. In general, our guiding principles are around affordability, reliability. Those are key to us. Also sustainability. Obviously, we want to do things in the most sustainable way possible, and really protect and promote local energy democracy. So that's being able to make decisions locally and also helping customers make their own decisions and guide how their community is going to move forward. You've heard a lot of this on the working group, but I just want to set the context from our perspective. We also appreciate the committee starting this process and really appreciate the environment that Chair Sheldon and Senator Bray, as the co-chairs of the committee, and Representative Sibilia and Senator Watson created in that group. Felt it was really an open, honest dialogue. Folks were very passionate and articulate in their positions, and the way the committee was, the working group was run, allowed those conversations to happen. Sometimes tense, was sometimes difficult, but I think we got the information that we needed to facilitate later discussions. As legislative council mentioned, I personally was very frustrated with the facilitation at the beginning, but I think the way that process worked really helped draw out distinctions amongst the parties and set some of the guardrails for how we could move forward in negotiations. The process was not, however, really conducive to a lot of the nuance behind how you would reform the bill. Questions were posed to us very generically, with up or down, as the polling structure commented, is really yes or no on very broad questions. So the one weakness I think that happened in that process was not really allowing the space and the time to have the more detailed conversations, which are happening now. As a result of the report, we're continuing discussions amongst the working group. Folks have kind of hinted at this, but I just want to be explicit. The draft bill that Legislative Council put forward in the report is not something VEPSA would support as the starting point for conversations. We think that the framework the committee members have been putting together and that was in the appendix is a much better place to start. It does capture a lot of the nuances. It gives flexibility for folks to move forward given their own particular situations. And just to highlight something Representative Sibilia said early on, it was highly negotiated and involved a lot of compromise. So even the framework represents a pretty delicate balancing of all the interests that were in the room. Our particular principles, and as Darren described, 4 key points for Burlington, these would be our equivalent. We really were focused on maintaining affordability. We were concerned going into this conversation that moving too quickly or setting requirements for too localized renewable supply, relying too heavily on things that had to be local to Vermont and really defined, could result in significant cost increases to consumers. So we were monitoring that. We tend to make power supply decisions 3 to 5 years before delivery actually occurs. So we needed whatever changes are going to happen to reflect the ability for the utilities to move and react to what had to happen. Again, moving too quickly could cause us to have to sell power we've already bought and kind of restructure portfolios that would, again, increase cost to consumers. In our case, we've made a significant investment. Many of our municipal communities put hydro plants in, some of them 100 years ago. That was a major community investment. They've maintained that generation going forward. They've gone through the permitting processes. They've made significant capital investments. We wanted to make sure that the structure recognized that. And gave them a path to be able to get value out of those plants in the future and continue to make investments. And we recognize here that the renewable energy component is only one aspect of cost that's hitting the electric grid. As we electrify, and I think Ben Walsh said this in his testimony, the general expectation is that loads are going to double as we electrify the economy. That not only requires more renewable energy, it's going to involve significant investments in the distribution and transmission grid to be able to accommodate that additional load. And we're seeing more and more climate change is requiring a hardening of the system. So we're trying to balance where's the best way to put our funds and invest in the grid. Certainly, we want to move forward with renewable energy as quickly as we can, but we need to do that recognizing that there are other challenges that need to be financed and funded. So our position in the framework is, if you read through the appendix, things are kind of mixed together with all the different types of utilities. So I pulled out our components specifically for the municipal piece of that. We'd be agreeing to 100% renewable energy by 2035. 10% of that coming from the new renewable, the Tier 1A, the regional renewables. And after 2035, all additional load growth would be met with new renewables. And the one exception to that is Swanton, as is mentioned previously. They are 100% renewable already. So they would be carved out and put in with Burlington and Washington Electric Co-op in that separate approach. On distributed energy, we're also willing to go to a 20% renewable local distributed energy by 2035, again, with Swanton being the exception. And recognizing the municipal hydro plants, the small ones that those local communities have invested in and as a centerpiece for them, that those would be now moved into eligible for the distributed energy resource. Under the existing statute, they are not counted toward the distributed energy component. We end up having to retire them, the renewable energy credits from them in the total renewable bucket. But they're not actually recognized for their local benefits that they bring. Like Burlington, we'd be looking at 100%. The Swanton is 100% renewable utility, meaning it's new load growth with new renewables. And similar to the co-ops, we have a wide range of net metering infrastructure within the municipal utilities. Some of them have very little. Others, Hardwick, for example, is very significant. Up to 30% of their load is now served by net metering. So we find the net metering changes, the removal of the group net metering, and allowing those RECs to be moved from place to place to be retired as brings the most value to the utility to be an important aspect of what we're agreeing to. The conclusion I've said all of this before. I do want to note the working group is continuing to talk. We're actually trying to change the framework into a proposed legislative language. So to the extent you are able to, I would encourage the committee to just give the space for that conversation to continue. I think you'll potentially have a bill that's in a good starting place for your conversations without you having to do the work to actually convert the framework into something that you can act on. And with that, I'll stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for your testimony. That was very clear. Do members have questions for Mr. Nolan? Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And good morning. Hope you're doing well. I'm curious, your point about, your 3 to 5 year planning horizon and contracts that you may have already secured. What percentage of your portfolio would you say, is in that camp where you've already secured those contracts?
Yeah, across all of the members, we're about 75%. We roll out. We tend to buy every 18 months or so, and each purchase goes out 3 to 5 years. So about 75% of the portfolio is locked down right now, and it would require some kind of change in order to make it meet the new requirements. We tend to buy contracts that have so-called Tier 1 RECs, the total renewable RECs attached to them. So our main concern is if we now move up the Tier 2 requirement or add the new Tier 1A, those contracts we've already purchased with standard Tier 1 RECs attached to them wouldn't qualify for those new tiers. So we want the space to be able to fold those into our new purchasing decisions.
Thank you, Ken.
Thank you again for your testimony. You were unfortunately competing with an adorable deer that has been wandering through the woods around us. Still with us. Next up, we have the general manager of the Village of Hyde Park. Brian Evans, and I don't know how to pronounce him. Mungen. Brian Evans Mungen, thank you.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. I'm Brian Evans Mungen. I'm the general manager of the Village of Hyde Park. As you may have noticed from Ken's list of utilities, we are not a member of VEPSA, but we are still a municipal utility. Currently, we have about 1,300 customers, and our portfolio mix is one that is very high percentages, about between 85 and 90% clean. And I stress the word clean as opposed to renewable, because based upon the strategy that Hyde Park has employed over the last several years, including the addition of a 1 megawatt solar farm, as well as a 0.5 megawatt worth of net metering, approximately on a nameplate basis, our system is covered by 50% solar on a nameplate basis. So Hyde Park has taken a very proactive approach relative to its investments and its structure of its portfolio requirement. And it has built that out so that through 2034, we are able to maintain consistency with the current legislation and standard requirements. When we take a look at what was proposed, and I was a part of the group, the legislative study group, and did offer many of the comments, and I do support various aspects of the report. What I can't do is I can't support it in its entirety, because when I take a look at what the advocation is that when I contrast that against what Hyde Park has already done and what it's laying out to do for the future, for example, our costs are going to increase by $500,000 from 2030 to 2035 if the changes as being suggested are enforced. And this is based upon current market structure. If in fact that some of our decisions that we previously made are somehow not, because of the fact that we're going to renewable as opposed to clean, then we're looking at stranded investment. And that's just going to further escalate because we're not going to be able to get out of those arrangements that we've already entered into. And so that is just going to add additional costs on top of the $500,000. In addition, when we take a look at what else is going on around New England, there are other influences that are expected to change market prices for RECs, power supply, and various other options. And so while we have a very good commitment right now of our resources to our load requirements, and we are able to meet the current requirements, we want to be able to not have to lose in that regard. So for those reasons, as I indicated in my submission that I presented early, I hope you've had a chance to take a look at it. For the reasons that were there and what were discussed, Hyde Park was not in a position to support the outcome as it was proposed in the report. There are additional reasons that we would take a look at this. When we take a look at our portfolio, it is a very, very balanced approach. And we are looking at the fact that we are trying to project rate stability and reliability through our customers. And based upon the fact that our portfolio does include wind, water, waste, wood, solar, natural gas, and nuclear, we have put together a very balanced approach that takes a look at our requirements and serves them in a very economic manner that has provided for rate stability over the last several years. So I think 2020 was the last time that we had a rate increase, even though we're looking at one going forward. Right now, we've had very stable rates for the last several years. Now, when we take a look at what else is going on in the renewable environment, as I've offered in my sheet, I have been in the industry for over 35 years. I have been able to participate in various activities associated with energy transaction supply and all of those ranges. I've also been involved at the national level at the NERC and NESB, understanding what's going on in the industry. And all of the information that is coming forward from those two fronts does not pragmatically suggest that renewables in the manner that are being suggested for 2030 to 2035 is the most stable and reliable. There are issues that in the inverter-based resources have in their ability to serve today. There are a number of issues that have been identified. When you take a look at the fact that NERC has several events that have occurred since 2018 that have demonstrated that renewable energy, not renewable, inverter-based resources have certain performance issues that lends itself to not necessarily having the most reliable outcome from these devices. And so that is another part of the risk, that if you are counting on these resources to a higher degree of investment, then if they don't perform, then obviously you're stranded in the market and you're going to be subject to the spot prices. And that is a risk that just, it raises the possibility of rate and financial instability. We do believe that renewable for going forward is possible. The industry will continue to make strides on improving the technology. It's just that between now and 2035, I am unconvinced that it's going to be, it's going to be there during this entire next 10-year period. So, that's part of the reason why Hyde Park took a strategy the way that it did in order to build a portfolio that provides for a mix of resources, not dependent upon any one particular resource over another, and it provides for a stabilized commitment to our power supply. As was also mentioned, we are, because of the technological requirements of the greater investments in inverter-based activities, this is going to require changes within our transmission and distribution footprints that we are not ready yet to implement. And when we take a look at the supply chain issues associated with transformers and other equipment that will be necessary, protection systems, and other devices that will need to reinforce the existing transmission and distribution footprints, again, we're not in a position to readily be able to bring all of this into fruition, prior to 2035, where I see things right now. So with that, I will conclude my testimony and take any questions anybody may have.
All right, great. Thank you so much. I'm curious, what is your current rate at Hyde Park?
The rate?
The rate. Rate.
Residential rate?
Sure.
I believe that it is around 20 cents a kWh.
Okay, thank you. Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I guess I hear your concern, your unique utility within the Vermont structure about rates. That being said, when I think about, how many natural gas plants have gone down, surprise, unplanned or nuclear, and then when you're talking about some of the inverter questions from a technical perspective for renewables, I would argue that our largest challenge with reliability right now in Vermont is storms. And, we're going to have to upgrade transmission, distribution, like all of these systems many times in light of storms. So my question to you is, what I heard from your testimony was sort of, I'm not sure renewables is ready. And I'm pushing back on that because I think what we're not ready for is storms. And what we really need to do is actually figure out how to make our electricity system be more responsive and be able to handle more storm events. And in my mind, part of that is renewables plus storage plus lowering our demand. So wondering if you have any feedback on me pushing back on that. And I'm not saying that we don't have technology issues in every type of energy, but I mean, the number of times I hear that renewables are not dependable, when I look at like natural gas plants shutting down, coal not operating, like it's always one-sided.
And I understand and respect that opinion. Let me just offer this. That's why we've offered, or why we've structured a very balanced portfolio, because we're not going to be solely dependent upon natural gas, nuclear, or inverter based. We're taking a very balanced approach. Hyde Park has a portfolio of 9 different resources that makes up its portfolio. Okay, 9 different, because of the fact that we are looking at the fact that there are rationales for why some technologies don't work at certain times. We recognize that. That's why we built a balanced portfolio. So to that point, I agree with you. No technology is perfect. That's why you build a diverse portfolio. To the second question, let me offer this. In the last 20 years, okay, Hyde Park has only had 3 occasions of where their system has gone out because of its transmission interconnection with Green Mountain Power. Okay, in 20 years, it has only gone out 3 times.
Good work.
November 27th, 2023, twice, and then December 4th. I understand and respect the viewpoint of the weather events also causing problems. And we are addressing that matter by taking a look at what is our requirements for maintenance and continuity of being able to provide service, and taking a look at our infrastructure requirements. And that's why I highlighted that as part of our movement looking forward, because we do have to make investments to reinforce the system.
So I just want to throw out 10% by 2035 for tier 1A, or 20% by 2035 for tier 2 from all renewables, in your mind, ruins the balance.
The concern for me is we have 7 employees. Okay. Administratively, we have to react and work just like Green Mountain Power does. Burlington, with a lot more employees. Okay. We have 7. Yep. Okay. Administratively, that becomes a hardship for an organization like ours to be, and we do rely on a supply organization to help us deal with our power supply and renewable requirements. Okay. They're located elsewhere, but they're in New England and they help us. So we have sources to help us get there, but it's still administratively burdensome for us to have to deal with 5 levels of administration thresholds as opposed to the current 3.
Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
No, there you go.
Michael Azorchak from Stowe Electric.
Thank you. I did send a PowerPoint. We can run through it pretty quickly. There, I don't know.
Yeah.
No, I'd send ahead of time.
Yeah, everyone has it. You can run through it themselves. We don't usually run it from here.
That's fine.
Sorry about that.
No problem. So Michael Azorchak, Town of Stowe, run regulatory legal affairs. First couple slides are just giving you who we are, because I know we haven't been here often. It's because I don't have always the capacity to be here. So I apologize for that.
Good.
The third slide, the purpose of that is just to show you our current strategy. We're like everyone else here, especially VEPSA and Hyde Park. We all pretty much do a similar thing. The point is to show the diversity of the resources that we already have. Like VEPSA, like Hyde Park, we want to maintain that diversity and flexibility. Tier 2, that's just showing you how we meet our current Tier 2 as it stands under the 10% in state. So it's the VEPI contracts, net metering, and then our own solar, and then a new solar that we're building down in southern Vermont.
VEPI, what is VEPI?
It's they administer the standard offer contracts. Slides 4 and 5, I pointed out in my minority report. Obviously, we asked this group to listen to a broader array of voices than just in this room. We're obviously very focused on power supply measures, impacts to the utility, employees, et cetera. Stowe Electric has done a customer survey. We prioritize based on what our customers want, and they want reliability and cost. Cost, to be transparent, is because we've had 2 rate increases in the last 18 months. So that's obviously on folks' mind as they see rates increase. It's going to immediately come to mind. And then carbon is third, carbon reduction. Similar with the DPS statewide study. Don't need to spend too much time on that. For me, purposes here, it's a slide 6. That's probably the most relevant. And in fact, we're agnostic to whatever the group comes up with. Because Stowe Electric, we're here to serve our members and serve the state, right? So I can't get into the weeds on 10%, 20%, regional tiers, et cetera. The point is I need flexibility to get there. So whatever the group tells me to do, I'm going to do. I'm going to do the best of my ability for my staff and then obviously our ratepayers. So because of that, we're not advocating any one position over another. We want to see the greatest flexibility for the greatest resources that allow us to serve our customer base the best. I will say that we've spent a lot of time in the past 3 years to meet the current RES. And to Brian's point, it is expensive for small munis. I manage the RES, which includes tier 2 and tier 3. So I physically manage the rebate program myself. That's from showing up to any EVT joint meeting, filings with the PUC, DPS, and then actually talking to people how they can get a rebate for a heat pump. I have a great job because of it, but it's also time consuming and stressful.
Can you just, how many staff do you have?
11.
And what is?
That's linemen and admin. We do have a tree crew that we stood up this year to help us with things like resiliency, hardening our system. So.
And what is your residential electric rate?
The first 76 kilowatt hours is 10 cents. That's the NYPA block for the munis. Anything after that is 20 cents. And that's gone up, like I said, twice since 22, I think is when I had my first rate case filing.
Well, Representative Simmons.
I hear the concerns about size, and I recognize that from the previous witness in terms of staff. I guess I'd say I think that's part of why Efficiency Vermont was created in terms of if you're answering questions about how to get a heat pump. I'm just curious how it shakes out that there's VIPSA, but without the two of you, is that a board decision, or how does that, in terms of coordinating resources and lifting work from staff?
So I don't know that this is the right forum for that full answer. I will just say that there are reasons made to separate from VEPSA for BED, Hyde Park, and SED. I'll respectfully leave it at that.
Okay.
I guess I can generally or more specifically say we feel that we can better advocate for our customers by having it all in-house, or as much as we can in-house.
Thank you.
Now, leave it there. Net metering, we know it. We feel it's expensive. I'm not as concerned about the other utilities, about the cost. What I'm concerned about is utilization of excess solar. So we want to be able to maximize the use of excess solar, which is why we're looking at battery storage. So we would love to see a role for battery storage in any new RES. Understanding that I also told you I was agnostic to what y'all come up with, but we see that as an added value. So as solar generation is excess on our system, we are backfeeding on substations, which to Brian's point requires expensive upgrades. Storage can help us better utilize that. I'm sure you're all aware of the EV rate that's supposed to go into effect at some point between now and 25. We would love to be able to use storage to store excess solar during the day, discharge it on the system at night to avoid concerns about any peaks that might be created by EVs, any need, quite frankly, for starting up a new EV rate, which is going to be more administratively burdensome, more costly for our system. So can we find creative, flexible ways to deal with all the challenges that we're faced with, rather than simply coming up with more regulatory requirements?
Representative Smith.
Thank you. How many charging stations do you have installed?
We own 11. I can't speak, there's more than that, but the utility has 11 that I also manage and operate as part of my staff duties. And we have 2 fast chargers. One is in operation, it's not operable, and ChargePoint doesn't want to pay to replace it. So I can use funds for that as well. But the other chargers throughout our system are level 2. they're primarily at commercial establishments trying to add a value to their customers. Vail would love to build out more charging stations. There's some complexities to that. And then the last point, really, I think the take-home message, I've said it before, we view nuclear and large hydro as the bridge gap. That's what we see will get us to the end state that this legislative body would like to see. Quite frankly, our ratepayers want to see. We think that'll give us the time to harden our system, add storage. Peter mentioned the hydro that we want to restore in Stowe. We want to add more solar. We'd like to do something innovative with that hydro. We see these larger nuclear and large hydro as the bridge gap for us to get there.
Thank you for coming in today and for your testimony. Do members have any further questions? Right, Representative Stebbins.
What is large hydro? Is that like, you'd like more HQ, or is that, what is large hydro? Is that
Yeah, I
your
mean, like,
project?
For example, the NIPA contracts are going to come up for renewal. We would
Okay.
love that to stay part of our portfolio. Hydro-Quebec, we are a big fan of. I'll just be honest.
You are or you aren't?
We are. Yeah, I mean, it's reliable, it's consistent, fully transparent. My law school roommate works for a hydro company, so I've been a fan of hydro forever. But we see it as base load. It's already built, it's reliable, and it's a relatively inexpensive resource. And then, like I said, we see it as a long-term bridge. We do have contracts through 2038, to Ken's point, that some of this there's a reality in how we change PPAs that we're already involved in.
Thank you.
Thanks again for your testimony.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we have Jeffrey Cram from Global Foundries.
Couple slides here. Disabled screen sharing. Okay, perfect. Morning.
Morning.
Thank you. I'm Global Foundries. First of all, I wanted to thank this committee and Chair Sheldon, and Vice Chair Sibilia for inviting us to testify today and have the opportunity to say a little bit about Global Foundries, why this is important to us, and then some comments on our participation in the working group and our thoughts going forward. So the first I wanted to share is a little bit about who we are. Yes, Global Foundries is located in Essex, Vermont. We refer to ourselves as Fab 9. We're a global manufacturer of semiconductor chips. See a bunch of smartphones on the table. There's a good chance if you've got a smartphone on here, some of the chips in that phone were manufactured in Essex. Manufactured for the automotive industry. Right now, we're working on technology that helps extend battery life in EVs, defense, medical sectors, all of that. We are Vermont's largest for-profit employer, and we contribute a significant amount to the dollar value of the state's exports. For semiconductor manufacturing itself, it is very energy intensive. And so that's a kind of the crux that we come into here. And in the industry itself, we have to compete on both price and quality, and electricity for us is a significant portion of our facility's operating costs. So to help manage that, we petitioned the Public Utility Commission last year, and we were granted the ability to form a company called GF Power, which serves as the utility. So that's why we're here with all of the utilities to help manage our costs. So GF Power is a utility that has a single customer, that's Global Foundries. And we are a significant consumer of electricity within the state, roughly 7-8% of the state's consumption. And being a utility helps us manage our costs and helps with the self-determination on which contracts we're going to sign. On the environmental side, Global Foundries is a voluntary Journey to Carbon Zero program. So it's a program to cut emissions across all of our sites worldwide. We have sites in Asia, we have sites in Europe and also in the United States. And it's a global commitment to reduce our emissions. And that lines up very well with a 100% renewable energy portfolio and the actions that we're taking here in Vermont. We're also worldwide working on developing solar at all of our sites. So we're working on doing some on-site generation as well. Pause there for a second. Feel free to ask a question if I've gone over something too. Okay. So I just want to take one last slide just to talk about how we have the opportunity to maximize the value of how GF can contribute to the renewable energy standard and how we maximize the reduction of emissions both at GF and in the state. We're pretty unique, obviously, as a manufacturer in this discussion with only the single customer. We are working, as I mentioned, to build renewable energy on site. We have a significant electrical infrastructure on our site. We take power directly from Velco at 115 kV, and I have a team of engineers and electricians that manage that step down distribution through the entire site. And looking to put the solar onto primarily already developed locations. So we're committed to 100% renewable that we've talked about broadly with the group 2030 time frame. We're also committed to 20% in-state renewables by 2035, and that's a combination of renewables located in-state and then we develop on our site. So what's unique about us is for a utility, we're very small, 700 acres. But for a manufacturer, it's good sized in Vermont. And we've looked at our campus and said, we think we can fit maybe 26 megawatts on that campus. We've got 10 megawatts in development right now with a Vermont renewable company. And what we're really looking for some help with, in order to maximize the build out on our campus, is to allow everything that is cited on our campus as a new renewable to be counted as a tier 2 renewable under the renewable energy standard. The unique thing about GF is when most of the solar production is going middle of the afternoon and hot out, that is our peak time of consumption because we have to condition our manufacturing space. So anything that we can locate on our site immediately becomes usable in our manufacturing process. So it's a real good way to site generation right near the point of consumption. Even with that, if we build out all of the sites that we think we can build out, that's only going to equal about 8 to 9% of our load. So to get to 20% on that tier 2 standard, we have to do something else. We have to go procure it elsewhere in Vermont. We have to develop it elsewhere in Vermont. And what we're proposing is under the tier 1A standard, which is a regional standard, is to give us the flexibility to make the best decision on where we can go procure that additional new renewable, whether it's new renewables in Vermont or new renewables in offshore or New Hampshire, is to provide us the flexibility to go either direction once we've built out our campus. The last I have is a request, and it's the last consideration we have is on the tier 3, and we're not, the previous discussions that Candace is having is we're not making large changes to tier 3. What we're asking for is to be able to expand the use for local foundries a little bit to allow us to meet our tier 3 obligation through the reduction in manufacturing emissions. There is existing language already in the renewable energy statute that points to manufacturers that can reduce their manufacturing emissions to allow it to apply to standard offer. This expands that to tier 3 and allows GF to make the most effective and efficient investment to lower emissions coming from the GF facility, but also emissions in Vermont as well. That was a fairly rapid, in the interest of time, trip through what GF is and how we can participate. Can I answer any questions on this?
Thank you for your testimony. And it was it's clear and you do have two great slides for us. Representative Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the presentation. How many employees do you have in that facility?
You're around slightly under 2,000, I believe.
Really? Like 2,000?
Yes.
So to reiterate, you are part of this group agreement and you are hoping for some slight changes to tier 3 to enable the credit towards reduction of your current greenhouse gas emissions.
That's correct. It's been a very collaborative stakeholder group that's put together a proposal that's considered the uniqueness of all of the different utilities. And so in that vein, the proposal that group is putting forward, we fully endorse that proposal.
Thank you again for your testimony.
Great, thank you.
Members, we are at noon. We have our next witness is available, and I would like to ask, actually, Mia, do you want to testify now? And then also ask the group if you are able to stay through one more testimony. Others can stay for 10 more minutes. Yeah, okay. Would you like to testify?
I do have a conflict this afternoon, so this would be great. Thanks. Thank you for inviting me to testify. I represent Vermont Housing Finance Agency. We're a statewide funder of affordable homes for low and moderate income home buyers and renters. We're really grateful to have included in this process as a houser. The environmental and utility advocates on this working group have done a really good job proposing updates to the RES that balance ambitious climate goals with the impact to ratepayers and service reliability. VHFA agrees that a transition to a 100% renewable standard is an important step to addressing our climate crisis, and it can offer really important social benefits for all Vermonters. However, the legislation establishing the working group also included a charge to review how current programs impact environmental justice-focused populations, including low-income households, and assess whether any changes to the RES will address the inequity of distribution of benefits of renewables between different residential properties. VHFA feels that there is still more work to be done to properly assess the impact of proposed changes under that criteria and to consider new policy solutions to mitigate potential harms. Even a moderate increase in electrical costs will be felt by the lowest income Vermont households. As revised RES scenarios and compliance dates are proposed by this committee, VHFA suggests that it would be valuable to revisit rate modeling on a per utility basis to ensure that there aren't potential larger impacts to some customers or some demographic groups. It'd be really worthwhile to look at the average electrical bill for low-income ratepayers to assess what those rate increases will feel like on a household budget and impact on energy cost burden. I know that some of my colleagues from the utilities have already started to produce some of those estimates and they've shared it with you, but I think having that information on the record would be really valuable to give a lot of legislators more confidence in supporting a 100% renewable standard. As the committee also considers potential changes to net metering in RES discussions, VHFA urges you to consider ways that these proposals might impact how households living in different types of homes are able to access solar energy resources. In our affordable housing world, this discussion comes at a time when our housing systems are under significant strain to add new units, house Vermonters experiencing homelessness, and containing rapidly escalating development costs. The environmentally conscious development choices that VHFA and its housing funder partners already mandate and incentivize, such as infill development, housing placed near public transportation, high performance building standards, already have an impact on the costs that we're seeing. At the same time, housing funders and developers are also under increasing pressure to decarbonize their buildings, which we expect will increase operating costs under all electric designs. The median tenant living in buildings funded through the tax credits awarded by VHFA earns just $16,800 per year. The costs of decarbonization cannot and should not be borne by these households. Many affordable housing developers are planning solar projects to mitigate cost increases without shifting the burden of the increased electrical load onto tenants. However, multifamily building built in a downtown area or village infill site usually does not have anywhere near adequate rooftop space for solar panels. Typically, we're seeing that it can offset no more than 15% of building load in most scenarios, especially as those rooftops will increasingly need to house heat pumps. This has led developers to consider exploring off-site solar alternatives. At the same time, VHFA is in discussions with the Public Service Department on Vermont's application for the Solar for All competition under the multi-billion-dollar Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, which is part of the Inflation Reduction Act. The EPA is going to announce awards for Solar for All in March, and VHFA hopes to receive a multi-million-dollar subgrant from the department to fund affordable housing solar projects. In addition to rooftop or on-site projects, we're also exploring awarding Solar for All funds to larger off-scale projects, which is an important part of our strategy to reach the low-income tenants in buildings that are never going to make sense for on-site solar for the reasons I've described. Retaining access to community solar projects is going to be vital to maximize the impact of Solar for All and all the billions of tax credits and incentives available under the Inflation Reduction Act, many of which are specially targeted to low and moderate income communities. If we don't keep community solar as an option, Vermont may be passing on the opportunity to access millions of IRA dollars. I've been focusing a lot on the specific challenges that we're seeing in affordable housing, but the changes to the res will impact households in many different types of homes that are unsuitable for solar projects. In particular, renters are unable to make improvements to their homes that would help them meaningfully reduce their energy costs. Outside of subsidized housing, landlords that are empowered to make efficiency improvements usually decline to do so because they wouldn't see any economic benefit. VHFA is concerned that reducing or eliminating access to participation in community solar projects takes away one of the few options available for renters to meaningfully address those costs. VHFA recognizes the concerns that partners have raised around net metering, including that the current system can result in a cost shift from high-income households that can install on-site solar to low-income households that can't. However, just restricting community solar options while preserving net metering rates for high-income households and single-family homes doesn't really meaningfully solve this challenge, even if it is important for preserving overall rate structures. If changes to net metering are ultimately considered by this committee, VHFA would urge you to explore compromise approaches to help contain costs while facilitating access to solar for lower-income households. There's been a lot of discussion with us and utility partners about potentially carving out exceptions to continue to allow community solar projects that have a direct benefit for the subsidized affordable housing projects that I've described. Based on feedback from developers we work with, we'd also like to see a smoother permitting process that reduces costs and uncertainty in solar projects, which I know is a big ask, but I have to raise. VHFA and other housing funders want to continue to be part of these conversations as an advocate, working cooperatively with utilities and interest groups to find solutions that equitably serve Vermonters. The cleaner grid offered by a 100% renewable energy standard is going to have limited benefits for the households that can't reduce their dependency on fossil fuels. Without carefully considering all of these proposed measures through an equity lens, we run the risk that our efforts to reduce emissions result in increased income inequality. Thanks.
Thank you for your testimony. Representative Sibilia.
I'm fine as long as we're not taking questions, but if we're taking questions, so I have one.
Yeah,
comments.
Question. Yes, go.
Just wanting to talk about net metering and who's paying for that now. I mean, I think you've talked about it. When we think about offsite net metering projects, group net metering projects, I mean, that's really merchant generation. And who is paying for that right now?
Do you mean on a macro level or for affordable housing?
I mean, on a macro level.
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly understand the concern that ratepayers are paying for it. I would contend that affordable housing is a pretty small percentage and is under a lot of different pressures to address a lot of different social problems in the ways that I've mentioned. And so I think a carve out, even if it's not 100% equitable among every individual measure, still serves a very low income population with fairly few resources. So
I wasn't sure if I was hearing a carve out for affordable housing because I thought you were speaking more broadly.
Sure. Yeah, that's been a difficult decision for us. I think our immediate concerns as a houser is subsidized affordable housing. But in my role on this committee, you know, with our charge to consider equity, I do think there is a larger discussion about what to do for renters and other people who can't install solar in their homes. That's a big discussion, and I realize that it's hard to resolve that inherent problem in the form of the res, but VHFA is sort of formally advocating for an exception for affordable housing and raising the issue on equity in general.
Representative Stebbins.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I hear your concerns. I guess I would try to separate them out. Res is one thing and affordability, yes, it's related, but there is H668, and you said you'd be happy to advocate further. H668 is a low income ratepayer protection act. So I'd love your feedback on that.
Sure.
Because I think we can do ad both.
Sure. Yeah, we were just thinking that, the affordable housing is in such a period of transition in terms of how we're going to do our energy costs in the future. And the idea of sort of closing the door on larger scale community projects just really makes us nervous that we might not be able to do everything we want to in the future as these Inflation Reduction Act resources come online.
Point heard.
Yep.
Thanks for your testimony. And did you provide it? I didn't see it up here, but if you would be able to provide it, written testimony, so we can post it, that would be really helpful.
Sure, I'll do that. Thanks.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. All right, with that, we will adjourn for lunch. Oh, Sean is from. You come back? I don't know. Okay, it's time. Yes, I think we need you to come back. We'll talk about that. Yeah.
Okay, I'll be.
Yeah,